Thank you, Pedro. Can you hear me, Cuba? For the moment, at least, we managed to pass through the blockade around the embassy, up into space, across the world, and down past the blockade on Cuba. So this moment that we have together reflects something important that's happening in the world, which is a way to bring different parts of the world together to breach through such extrajudicial, coercive, immoral blockades like the one that Cuba suffers and like the one that the Wikileaks organization suffers. And so bring about a new international solidarity, a new international body politic, which becomes aware of itself and its values. And once being aware of its values, can unite together to fight for those values. Because why I have been fighting a blockade of my organization and my people for about 3 years, Cuba has fought a blockade for 50. The origins of the US blockade against Cuba, well, I do not need to tell you them, but they are the desire for Cuba to be an independent nation. And the desire for the blockade against Wikileaks comes from just one thing, our desire to speak independently about the United States, to have self-determination in what we say history is, and similarly for Cuba to have self-determination for its people. In response to the blockade against us, we have been in a state of war with the United States. We started with a desire to collect and protect the true history of the world, because it is from the history of who we really are that everything that is good is derived. Every human decision that occurs in the world occurs based upon what we know. And if we do not know our world, how can we possibly live in our world? Our decisions are based upon the true history, including the recent history of what we are, or they are based upon a fantasy, an illusion, or blackness. And it is only the decisions that are based upon who we truly are that can make sense in the real world that we live in. Every other decision is like to roll a dice before the future.
And I'm not quite sure if you are aware of how moved we are because you're wearing a yellow ribbon. Thank you very much for that, because it's a very important cause for us.
I believe in the rights of these people, just like I believe in the rights of my people. My lawyer, a very good friend of mine, Michael Ratner, has fought for years for the freedom of the Cuban Five and represented one of the interventions in 2009 in the Supreme Court in the United States to try and have them released. So I am aware of the case. The case of the Cuban Five is clearly an extremely political matter in the United States. It's one of the more obviously, overtly politicized cases. It is a disgrace that in fact anyone could spend that long in a US prison, let alone these 5 individuals from Cuba. The internet offers, for the first time in a long time, the most powerful tool to break through the manipulation and control of the media. And the success and power of the Wikileaks organization and several others represents that ability. For Cuba, it also represents the ability for Cuba to tell its own story, for all those who are willing to listen. But still, we have a very big fight on our hands. The internet permits almost everyone to say what is true. but giant distribution companies try and fight the truth by diluting it, not simply to censor the truth out of existence, but to bury it entirely in a sea of lies. This is the challenge that we all face now, to stop this most important tool of global civilization, which we can use to solve global problems, come to a new international consensus, a new body politic, from being captured on the one hand by massive distribution companies like Disney or Time Warner, and on the other hand, to be captured by the United States and its allies as the largest, most aggressive worldwide surveillance machine ever. This is the fight of our age. I must say that Cuba has no need to fear the truth. The reality of its situation means it does not need to fear the truth. What it needs to fear is lies. We can sometimes feel here and there that the truth will sting us. But when your big enemy is a sea of lies, the truth is your friend. And we can see that in the US diplomatic cables that we released about Cuba.
What can Cubans do to help Wikileaks defeat the US blockade?
Very interesting question. Well, you know, Wikileaks, in order to deal with the blockade, we've had to start bank accounts in lots of different countries. We've made many different lawsuits. We've made motions at the European Parliament, some of which have succeeded, complaints at the European Commission, started up organizations in the United States, like the Free Press Foundation, to try and work around these blockades, done special things in France to try and work around them, etc. And Cuba has a very similar experience, trying methods to work around the blockade and also to draw attention to what is going on. So I think to draw this parallel with the groups that Cuba is used to drawing that parallel with, to say, look, this is the same sort of situation that WikiLeaks faces. This is a very modern thing. Maybe you've all gotten bored of the Cuban blockade and talking about that, but it's not just Cuba. This sort of political censorship of economy and information flow. This is something the United States is not just applying to Cuba, it's applying to other organizations as well. And who's going to be next? The reality is there is no self-determination, there is no sovereignty without economic sovereignty. There is no proper sense of a nation or a community without information sovereignty, without being blockaded in and isolated in terms of information flow. These are very important matters, not just for states, but also for organizations, groups, communities, and languages.
In a way, WikiLeaks has already helped Cuba because has demonstrated with the leaks that you've done a bunch of things that the United States is doing against Cuba. Documents are the proof of things that we already know that are happening, but are very important for us.
Thank you so much. Keep fighting. Never give up.